Imagine you are in a time machine and your memory just gets swiped. And wherever you go, you end up knowing as much as anybody that is in that society knows. Imagine you're standing in a field. Cars are there, you've heard of them, but you don't actually know anybody that has one, and you actually haven't even seen one. All of a sudden, you look up and you see something absurd. You see wood, like chunks of wood floating up above you, and then a person kind of like intermeshed in between it. You see the first flight. Imagine you go to the village before that even happened, a week before, and if someone were to ask you, hey, do you think that these two brothers over here, the Wright brothers, do you think that they are going to put a chunk of metal into the air? Do you think that it's just going to you're gonna witness the first flight? Essentially, the thing is that with this experience, these were going against like the laws of nature. You were postulating certain things, but you weren't thinking to experience this experience of like, oh my gosh, what if something totally opposite happens? And that's the idea of reinvention. We as a society have been consistently reinventing ourselves over and over and over again. And today, our topic on our podcast is reinvention. So, hi everyone. Welcome to Ali and Co, the podcast where we talk about complex things and we break them down. And today, again, our subject is reinvention. Over time, there have been so many inventions, from us being Neanderthals and managing fire, which is a huge invention, putting the first flight into the air, and then maybe even putting some things into space, which actually our guest over here has done that. He is one of the owners of a space station. Welcome, Chirinjeev. Very nice to be here. Very nice to have you here.
No, it's great, and I'm honored you're taking the time to talk to me. So thanks, Abby.
Yeah. So Chirinjeev here is a physician. He is a politician. He is an investor and entrepreneur. And he is involved in a lot of really cool projects. And I mean, it's just really exciting. And I think from the perspective of reinvention, uh, that's a range. So tell us about that range.
I think, when I came here, or actually when my parents brought me here when I was a little kid, you just never know what's going to happen. I think, Steve Jobs, when he gave his speech to Stanford's graduating class, he goes, life only makes sense looking at it backwards. Somehow, whether it's karma or fate, you've got to believe that the dots are going to connect in the future. So when I came to the US, I came here when I was 8 months old. My parents, as typical immigrant families, came here with little money, trying to make a life for themselves and their kids, which we did. But if you ask me, when I was a little kid going to high school or medical school or business school, what I was going to be doing, I would have had no idea. People always ask me, what are your plans in life? I just tell them, plan to be surprised, because you never know really where you're going to end up with. Follow your passions.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I do believe that perhaps maybe even your upbringing and who you were as a child might play into that kind of mindset. Would that be the truth? Were you still as a youngster? Did you have this sort of mindset where you're like, let's explore and let's just take us where life goes? Like, was that something that you always had in terms of your mindset as you being maybe that first grader? What was going on in your mind then?
I think, growing up, we came over as, a lot of families came over back in America. And I think wearing a beard and turban, everyone was confused as who we were. I think, you know, you'd always get teased or different things. But I remember when I was at Brown running for student government president or later the US Senate, wearing a turban was always, it was helpful. People would say, that guy looks scary. He's going to get something done. And then, meeting girls was great because they thought you were Aladdin or Alibaba or something like that. So I think it was the experiences of growing up. And then I think, but it wasn't always easy. When I graduated, you have to remember I had an undergraduate and medical degree from Brown, an MBA from Stanford. It was really hard getting a job.
So why would you think it? Because you would think that most people would think that having those Ivy League degrees make it easy to get a job. Do you think that that was to your detriment to some degree, or?
I don't think it was the degrees. I think it was new for a lot of people. I mean, you're talking, almost 20 years ago. I remember going for one interview, and when they saw what I looked like, they thought, well, can we end this interview in 5 minutes? And I chanted, it's okay, it's all right, you'll work for me someday. I probably shouldn't have done that. It took me 10 years for that investment bank to work on taking some of our companies public. But now, if you fast forward 20 years, if you look at the CEO of Google, the CEO of Microsoft, or the president of the World Bank, they all happen to be Indian or South Asian. So now they just assume you're smart. So now we're almost like ambassadors. So I think, things have changed. People are more accepting of different cultures and different things.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting experience, at least for me specifically. Growing up in that society, like I used to wear a hijab. And I remember I just wanted to volunteer at like a clinic somewhere. And, and I like on paper, I called and they're like, okay, why would you turn down a obviously free volunteer? And I showed up and they're like, no, 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 no.
No, I can relate to that.
Yeah. And it's debilitating to some degree because it's like, I have so much to offer here. And, and it's like, you're not seeing me for what it is, but you're absolutely right. I think that over time, society has definitely changed. There's always some new grouping that is coming into the mix that is being the one that is being questioned, or maybe people don't understand it, right? And so it's interesting though, but as much as you said, is that, with, especially in the media, you see, Desi people, like South Asian people, are the ones that are, oh, you're intelligent. If I put a brown person in a commercial, it's like, oh, okay, most people know. So that's intriguing. So now walk me through certainly that there's that experience, but you went to medical school and then you got your MBA. There's a wide range of things that you've done. So that's a big leap, right? How did you decide that, okay, I'm going to do this? I've seen myself in this capacity. I think that this is interesting. Let me move on to this. Like, I would like to understand, because for most people, it's hard for them to even make one change. It's like if they've been in one profession for a certain amount of time, they're not changing because they're like, "Oh, it's too much of a risk. It's too much of, so I'd love to understand the mentality of somebody that is like, you know what, the world is my oyster. I'm gonna try this, and then like this, I'm gonna make this happen, and I'm gonna move on to that. And this is interesting. So, I'd like to understand that.
So, I think if you think about it, and I was talking about that speech that Steve Jobs gave, he goes, the one thing that no one has been able to escape thus far in humanity is death. Whether we like it or not, we're all going to die someday. And always, in a way, it predicts on how you act and what you want to do. If you want to get married, have kids, you want to achieve something in life or be happy. It's all predicated on one day we're going to die. And maybe things are going to change in the future and humans could live for 1,000 years, which is possible. So I think, let's say, if you're not happy with what you're doing, your work or relationship, you need to change or do whatever you are going to do to be happy. So I remember when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut. And I found out I had to wear glasses. And the only way to become an astronaut through NASA was through the military flight training program. And if you wore glasses back then, you couldn't get into it. I had my mom take me to 3 different ophthalmologists. And when I found out that I had to wear glasses, I thought my life was forever, it was ruined. And then growing up, if you grow up in an Indian family, my mom told me, my brother and sister, you could do whatever you want in your life, but you first have to become a doctor. I go, Mom, that's a long time to be in school.
But first.
So me, my brother and sister, all became doctors.
Okay.
And then, I mean, it created, I love medicine. It's that famous saying, first do no harm and then do some good. It did help build a lot of credibility. And then I still always loved space exploration. It's something I always wanted to do. So, I was one of the founding directors of a company called MirCorp, and that company leased, the Mir space station. And, until then, only Russia or US had ever launched manned space programs. And in March of 2000, we launched the first privately funded manned mission to space. It was exciting. It was done on a Russian rocket called Soyuz. So it was exciting. It was never something I ever thought as a dream that we could ever do. And, then we bid with Lockheed, ATK, and Boeing on NASA's ISS CRS contract, the one that SpaceX won. And we were one of the 2 highest ranked bidders, but the decision was overturned. So it's something, we've been involved in for 2 decades. But if you had asked me when I was 13 years old, when I found out that I had to wear glasses and I could never get into aerospace or commercial space, I could have never imagined it. So what I tell people is go after your dreams and your passions. Don't let anyone say you can't do something.
Yeah, no, that's so true. For anyone that's watching, maybe perhaps like, do you think that when you were 13, it was something that you were still like, I'm going to still do this? Or do you find that it might have been something that fell into your lap, or here's an opportunity, I'm going to go after this because I'm excited about it?
I think that passion of mine, and it's still there, was always there since I was 13. It's always been my dream. And, we're still working in aerospace and defense, and it's still really exciting. Everyone has a childhood dream. I remember, I think I went to, different schools and had a lot of classes, but I still remember one class where the professor said, if you wanted to do 5 things in life where you had no limitations, what would they be? And to write them down. It could be as simple and as enjoyable as having a family, getting married, to having kids, to going into space, winning a Grammy, or seeing what the origins of the universe is, or meeting God. I think that really opened up my eyes that you could do whatever you want. At least it takes away the walls of limitations to go and try something. I think people sometimes feel they're so confined by the environment or the society that they were brought up in that they're scared to go try their dreams.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. Where do you think that a person that might feel confined, because specifically in the same culture that I understand, there's a lot of like guilt and shame that like, as even Asian parents that are like, listen, you need to do well, and listen, you need to take care of us all, and there's a lot of like of that embedded into culture, whereas a lot of different cultures also kind of prioritize certain feelings. There's certain emotions that they identify with. Do you find that perhaps maybe these ideas are things that we need to move away from to some degree, because sometimes they're very limiting, where it's like, listen, I have to take care of this person and I have these responsibilities, but I can't really go for my dreams because I'm a little bit limited. And how would you kind of advise that person where it's like there's a certain constraint? I mean, you know what I mean, right? Like I feel like there's like a certain kind of upbringing and culture and feeling. I mean, does that resonate with you? Do you feel as though that's something that maybe we experience, and how would somebody perhaps maybe step out of that idea training?
So I think, it goes across all cultures. Like a lot of times, there were people in a lot of cultures, it's the first kid going to college. And it's exciting because no one's ever, gone to college. Or in certain cultures, there's a traditional role for women. It's to get married, raise a family. It's not to go out and do different things and conquer the world. So I think having role models. And I also think that, you know, you have to do what makes you happy. There are certain things, whether you're a teacher, an artist, or a scientist, do what makes you happy because that's what you're going to be good at. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what's really important. If you, people always ask me, like, what does celebrity and fame mean? And if I were to ask you, Alia, who are the five richest people in the world, you may or may not know. Or if I asked you who were the five people who won the Best Actress award, you may have some idea, but you'd be guessing. But if I asked you the five people you love the most or the five people who influenced the most, you would know right away. So you kind of remember, what's the most important parts of life going forward.
Do you think that then being authentic to yourself is important? I do believe that maybe there were certain generations where we're finding that we're living in a society where we're putting others first. It is an external almost society where it's like, listen, we're living in a world where we're in it, but other people are existing too, which is the case at all instances. But maybe there was a generation where we're putting other people before us. I think perhaps, at least from what I'm noticing, and I'm not sure if you agree, is that that idea of authenticity and who you are now, it is becoming, listen, be true to yourself because you're the one that has been with you since day one. And really, there hasn't been anybody else that is with you through the whole then. Do you find that perhaps maybe that's a step towards understanding your authenticity and going for the things that you truly want to go towards?
Yeah, you got to do what kind of makes you happy. I think Albert Einstein said, beware of the mediocre people. They'll only try to bring you down. The great ones will try to help you. You got to do what makes you happy. At the end, it's going to be your life. Don't really worry about what other people say. I mean, when I was growing up, people said so many different things, good or bad. And even today, I'll read blogs and articles. There'll be good things and, bad things. I remember when I was running for the US Senate, there were great articles and there were articles that were definitely not flattering and it really bothered me. But if you just do what makes you happy, I think that's the most important. And don't worry about what other people think. Today, it's crazy. Like you look at if someone posts something on Instagram, they want to see how many likes you get and all of that. And I think it's almost, driving people, crazy. It's creating a society. Everyone now gets their 15 seconds of fame, no matter what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think our world has definitely shifted in terms of perhaps like, you and I grow up, you go to the library if you had a question, if your parents couldn't answer it. Perhaps maybe you'd find an answer as you were sifting through the books. The internet comes around, you have Google, you can put it into a search engine. And maybe you go to a site that you could find the answer, but now we have AI and it's a little bit different, and so who knows what we're headed towards. But I think it's just also, I would love to know personally, from your perspective, is that, where did you find this awakening? Because I think that most people are not born with this of like, I'm gonna just do what I feel I'm good at, and I'm gonna find, unless you are, which maybe you are. I wasn't, but like, where did you realize? Was there like a certain point in your life where it's like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do me.
I think everyone will look back and say, okay, some of the companies we started have done well. They changed the way people look at different industries. But they don't know the years we spent struggling with these companies, and a lot of them didn't make it. I remember there was a digital healthcare company where we were in all the papers. It was thought about breakthrough technologies. And that was a time when the internet collapsed and we couldn't generate enough revenue or cash flow. So, to your point, it takes time. You got to keep reinventing. I think when people start companies, most companies have changed their business model almost 360 degrees before they became successful. Thomas Edison said some people were so close, they didn't realize how close to success they were when they quit. And then I think Wayne Gretzky said the secret is not to be where the puck is, but to be where the puck was going. He was one of the greatest hockey players of our time. So I think don't get worried. You got to keep on going and following your dreams. Because if you love what you're doing, you're going to be happy. It doesn't have to be you have to make a lot of money or you don't have to make a lot of money, but you got to be happy, and eventually you figure it out. And like I said, don't let people say you can't do it. What did Walt Disney said? He said it's sometimes fun to do the impossible.
Yeah, I think at some points you realize, and maybe I wonder if you are, one of those people that thrives in discomfort. Do you think that maybe when things are going just perfectly smooth, that this is cool, but the times where you have the most kind of like a resistance in my life, I found that I kind of seek out the discomfort where it's like, oh, I kind of like to be uncomfortable. I like to be in this space. Is that something that resonates with you?
So it's funny. So, take it in two parts. Let's say relationships and companies. Like in a lot of South Asian cultures, they have what you call arranged marriages. I mean, it's not really an arranged marriage. They introduce you to people who you think you may be compatible with. And I was asking my parents about it. My dad goes, well, in an arranged marriage, you're not really in love because you're just meeting. It can only go up. And when you get married for love, you're already at the peak. There's really not much more, it can go. So I think, there's exciting times. I'm still looking for the right person. And then, building a company, everyone has their own ways of what to do. I mean, you can live, it's like a sine curve where you have the ups and downs. Sometimes the highs are great and the lows are really horrible, and you live for the next high. But the area under the curve cancels each other out. So either you can live a life where you're just, calm and happy and doing the right thing, or you can live for the highs or lows. It just depends on, what your makeup is. Everyone is different. Like you see people who are just, really happy. They go to their job, they have family and kids and go on vacations. And that's really important. Then you have some people who you see, you know, there are times when things are great and there are times when things are just absolutely horrible. It just depends on, where you want to live your life. And it's hard, it's not easy.
Do you think it's a mindset thing though? Because I think perhaps maybe our perception of somebody that looks happy, right? Like just because you have the family and the spouse that looks perfect on paper or whatever, like the kids and the dream life of the pet and the dog and the fishbowl and whatnot, while it might seem from one person's perspective to be perfect, perhaps maybe they're envious of somebody on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, they're free agents. You do what they want, and do you think that understanding in your mind, what is happiness?
It's a good question. I think comparison and comparing yourself to other people, I think that really kind of destroys a lot of happiness. I remember one class, and a lot of people probably have the same example. There's a professor, and there's a jar, and he puts these really big golf balls in there. And he asks, "Is the jar full?" And everyone says yes. Then he pours sand in there. And now the professor goes, "Is the jar full?" And the class goes, "Absolutely. There's nothing more you can pour in there." And then he pours water. And then the jar is absolutely full. And at the end, one of the students goes, "Well, what's really the point of this exercise?" The professor goes, "Well, if I filled the jar with water right away, I couldn't have placed the golf balls or the sand because the jar would have overflowed." So he goes, "Look at the golf balls as all the most important things in life, whether it's family, kids, your career, changing humanity, whatever you want to do to make," my dad said, "try to leave the world a better place, when you were born, than, when you leave. And if you do stuff that's, let's say, superfluous or not interesting, like the water or sand, you'll never have, time to do the important stuff like the golf balls."
Mm.
So I think, happiness is relative for so many different people. I think some people love to do things that are scientific, whether it's certain theories in physics or certain medical discoveries in oncology or cancer that'll help a lot of people. There's certain things which is very important. Some of the artists that'll do stuff that we all enjoy and admire. Or if you're a singer or a songwriter, or some of the things is just spending more time with, having family and kids. I remember when someone was sitting at my condo, it overlooks the city, and they saw the sunset and they go, "That's such a beautiful sunset. Have you seen it?" And I was thinking, I lived in that condo and I don't think I've ever really seen the sunset. And they go, "When you get close to the end, you're going to wish you saw a lot more of them." So I think happiness is different for everybody, what makes everyone happy.
But what is it for you?
It's a good question. I've always been trying to figure that out. And I think it changes over time. I mean, doing things like we have a biopharma company that's working on a discovery for malaria, an mRNA vaccine. Unfortunately, malaria kills almost 5,000 kids a year, more than the number of people who would have died of COVID. Trying to find that would help. We've been working on what we call a master checkpoint immune inhibitor. Because some of the reasons you die from cancer, your immune system doesn't attack cancer cells. And I think, unfortunately, everyone knows someone who has cancer and is suffering. So trying to find some of those cures or some of those things, makes me happy. I think when we were in launching the first privately funded manned mission to space, that was great. That was neat, or seeing what our drones have done in the conflict zones, to help change the scale of wars. But then, when I go and see my parents celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, or seeing my nephews and nieces those are things that are more important, or just simple things of like going on vacation. Sometimes, I think I spent so much time doing all this stuff and building it, you miss some of the other things in life. Sometimes there's a trade-off.
Oh, definitely. Now I feel like holistically, if I were someone that didn't know you, and I mean, I'm getting to know you, which is great. We were talking about all of the different uh, projects you're working on, and certainly they bring you a lot of joy because they're not a lot of people have the opportunity to be able to make an impact the way that you're able to make an impact. But if I were to take a step back and I'm looking at your life as someone who doesn't really, that maybe just met you and it's like, wow, this guy's done like a ton of things, like, and perhaps maybe from somebody who is trying to make a change in their life, they'd be like, well, audacity. How can he do all of these things? I mean, going from being a doctor to, being a businessman and multiple capacities, working on some really uniquely interesting ideas that are very different than the other, going into politics. And then, I mean, the space race, or I mean, well, it's not so much of a race anymore, but like just in general, I mean, maybe it's a race for humans that, just in the general public to be up in space. That might be one's capacity. How does this happen? How did you get there? Because I feel like there are a lot of people that'd be like, oh my God, I want to do that. How do you do that? And what compels you to do that? And I'd love to understand it.
So it's funny, like everyone, if you take the Beatles or you take Bill Gates, I think what people don't realize, everyone put in their 10,000 hours to get to where they were. Like for me, it started when I was 13. I always loved, space exploration, aerospace, and defense. And a lot of these companies that we started, I mean, it's been like 10 years. Nothing ever happened, overnight. So I think, everything we've done, we put in our 10,000 hours. I think people forget about the 10,000 hours. But someone says, if things aren't working, we learn in drug discovery, if you're going to fail, fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think that someone told me it's the same thing in relationships. Someone said that if you're in a relationship after 11 months, if you're not engaged or you're not living with someone, there's a 90% chance you're not going to end up with them. So whether it's work or a relationship or something, if you're not happy or it's not working, to your point, reinvent the wheel or do something that's going to make you happy. And I think there's very rare instances where you just snap your finger and something, happens overnight. We've seen a lot of different ages. We started out with the agricultural age, the industrial age, the information age. And now people ask, what's the next age? I think it's the age of creativity. You just have no idea how things are going to change or be.
Yeah, especially with AI and quantum. They're the way that we're thinking now, prompting. If you think about it, maybe on a more molecular level, if you can kind of draw that comparison, is that you have all of this data that you have access to, which is something that is computational. These models that are running, they're able to compute certain things, but you have to be creative enough to prompt it in a certain way, which I believe to some degree that's where the creativity comes in. Are there certain ways that you're being creative?
So, if you look at history, I remember probably when we used to go to dinner with our parents, I mean, cell phones didn't exist. You would eat and just talk. Now you go to dinner, you're on your cell phone, mails are coming, back and forth. There's just so much stimulation. And 2 or 3 years ago, no one really talked about artificial intelligence. If you were going to ask me where we're going to be probably I would say less than a decade. I think you'll see generations where humanity won't age. You already see like macaws and parrots will live for 60, 70 years or even 100 years. So, and if you look at biological age or your chronological age, there's sometimes not a lot of relationships. You'll see someone who's 20 who might look like they're 40 or 50, or see someone who's 50 or 60 who will look like they're 30. It's a lot of it is genetics. I think with AI, genomics, DNA sequencing, you'll see an age where humans will live for 100 years, 500 years, or 1,000 years. And I think that's not that far away. And I think you're already seeing stuff like that happening.
Oh, interesting. Well, okay. All right. So here, let's pose a hypothetical now, because now we're just going to go off topic. And okay, so in vitro fertilization, right? You're frozen. Essentially, you're brought back to life, right? If you freeze a body, that might be maybe a 60-year-old body, do you think that that's something that can potentially be brought back to life?
So, being a doctor,
Yes.
so if you take there's a really good documentary on the History Channel. It's called Never Say Die.
Okay.
And it talks about the scientific advancements we've made in humanity. So take, for example, there's a company called Core Blood, which I think almost 20% of women in America get it. So when you deliver,
Stem cell,
they
yeah,
take the
yeah.
stem cells.
I remember, actually.
Right. And what it does is that if you have a kid or something like that, those stem cells are omnipotent, right? They can develop into livers, pancreases, brains, or anything like that. Now, if you take a look at that, that's if whether you take, to your point, a 60-year-old and change them, or there's things called telomeres, right? You can change. One of the things that causes aging is inflammation and certain other things. You'll see people who are 120 or 60 that fairly are very healthy. So I think with new DNA sequencing technologies, all these new advancements using AI, someone who's 60 can be just like someone who's 20. I think Time magazine had a cover of a baby saying a baby born today, their average life expectancy is 120 years. Technology is changing so fast. How we could integrate AI, with humanity and living organisms, it's going to change.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'm familiar with the core blood. I said no. So I guess I didn't get that.
Maybe your daughter might say yes.
Maybe. I mean, genetics, right? But yeah, now that I'm hearing this conversation many years later, I probably should have said yes. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of different advancements. Certainly, with the optics of the situation. Recently, I saw what was the Kardashian mom. The name, Kris Jenner.
Yeah.
Yes. Recently, she got a surgery where it was, and everything. She just looked. I mean, just anybody can age in a way that is, but your mindset. I mean, if you're a vampire, you're gonna live forever. I mean, you've seen those vampire movies where at some point you're like, wait a minute, this guy's kind of depressed. Like he's been living for a long time. He needs he gets to these points of just he needs some consolation right there. I mean, I would say that mindset is certainly important. And if we're living for 1,000 years, I don't know. I mean, but it's certainly doable. And I think that understanding from a vantage point perspective, I mean, if we're thinking about, do you remember those floppy disks?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And what they say is about, there might have been generations before us that had many kinds of advents in their societies, but they could have deteriorated and eroded over time. And perhaps we did not have access to the technology to be able to comprehend whatever residual was left over, like a VHS. How difficult is it to go and find somebody that has a VHS player and convert it over to whatever format that we're watching it now? So maybe it's cyclical, I mean, society is definitely changing, but bringing it back to mindset. I mean, I love hearing this about you, and I'm actually more curious to hear, with your mindset. Um, what's next for you? Like, I mean, you've done so many different unique things that most people wonder, how can I be that? How can I employ that to my life? What does it take? What, I mean, I know you're you, but
So yeah, so those are a couple of, so going back to what we were talking about, like I met your daughter for the first time. If you put two of you together, you would never guess that you're mother and daughter, right? There's a lot to be with, genetics. And to the point, if we do everything based almost on the day we're going to die, but if we could live for 1,000 years, imagine everything you ever wanted to do, you could do in life. I mean, people think even a relationship that lasts a lifetime is hard, but can you imagine a relationship that lasts 1,000 years? So, I think if you really look at it from a medical point of view, you know, whether it's stem cells, collagen, there's already advancements, people die from, either stroke, cancer, or heart attack. And already, most people, a lot of people have cancer will live over 5 years, which is disease-free survival. And then if there's things, people just look at your outward appearance. Eventually you can regrow collagen or stem cells or things along those lines. So you'll always be and feel young. And to your point, it's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's less, stressful. Now, if you were to ask me, like, what are things, that are next, or maybe what that professor said, if I had no limitations, what would I want to do? Or what are 5 things? I think they've changed over time, and maybe in no particular order. One is, would love to fall in love, get married, and have kids. I remember when I was running for the US Senate, all the newspapers came to my house and they asked my parents, "What do you think?" And my dad goes, "This is a great country. I can come here as an immigrant and my son can run for the second highest elected office in the US." My mom came running down the stairs. "I'm just worried he's not going to have time to get married." And that's all the media focused on.
right.
So I think that would be, for me, something I would love to do. I think second would be to see how to change the course of humanity, figure out a way where people are not dying of cancer, but like we talked about, love to figure out a way where human life expectancy is infinite. And what becomes the most valuable commodity even today is time. So that's what I'd love to see. And you can see it happening. You can already see, if you slow down your metabolism, you don't age, that much. So there's so many things you could do. So that's
Don't you
just,
feel like you maybe get fat if you slow down your metabolism?
yeah, you could.
A little bit.
Maybe you try Ozempic, who knows? But
But aren't there flurries of data that show that perhaps maybe there's some blindness happening, where there's like a correlation of your optic nerve is if it's too short?
I mean, the truth is, like, you use Ozempic if you have diabetes, right? Because, but it's becoming, a fad. But so let's see. So that's
I
two.
love that you said that though, because it potentially could just be a fad.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a way of life. I mean, if you think about like just the optics of the situation where people are doing Botox and the fillers and stuff like that, now it's more of a let's go back to your natural, and just support the collagen growth and, instead of doing invasive things. So I wonder, I mean, obviously, you know that as a physician and somebody that is in that industry of like the biosciences, biomedical kind of like, advents and innovation, there's always something new, So, I mean, it's just like a cycle, do you think? Or
It's a cycle. I mean, look, everything, beauty, as my dad says, is in the eyes of the beholder. It's more what's, interpersonal. And as you grow, there's things that are much more, important. Our society sometimes maybe places too much emphasis on looks. But now you see a lot of couples, they just because they get along with each other. So let's see. So I have three others. Um, I think one would be to find the origins of the universe, to meet God, to see what really created life and all of that. Um, I think the other one would be, to your point, to have peace of mind, be happy, spend time with my, family and all of that. And I still like politics. I'd love to be, Secretary of State to see, because all these wars among people, it's sad. They shouldn't exist. It's changing now with a lot of drones are now being used in warfare. And the thing is, what we have to be, I think someone says we need to put, I think two quotes, I can't remember where it was. Someone says, when our love of power goes away and more for the love of mankind, you'll see almost wars go away. And then, you know, we have so many nuclear weapons that can destroy the world 10 times over. And we've got to figure out how to keep something like that. Because World War III, if it's a nuclear war, there won't be humanity. So it's things to think about.
actually, and I'm thinking about it. So my question to you, I mean, since the beginning of time, certainly now with all of this communication and the fact that we can easily access people, if you think about it historically from the beginning of time, people couldn't communicate with each other. You wouldn't know what tribe was roaming where. You didn't even know what the face of the world looked like, right? Over time, you find that there are certain groupings of individuals that would be these groupings, right? Specifically from a cultural perspective, or whatever their ideologies are, they're living kind of closer to go and together, and they're a unit, right? Over time, then you develop countries with borders. You have these individuals, and now you have these organizations that are basically kind of on a global perspective. If you think about the world from living in caves to where we are right now, do you think we're headed towards a trajectory of society being one? Maybe. I mean, wars might be something now, but do you think over kind of like the course of time, perhaps maybe we're headed towards something better? Or do you think that maybe with this kind of idea of the internet and immediate gratification, do you think that maybe people are headed more towards brain rot? I mean, where do you think we're headed?
So you look at, historically, you've seen different cultures. You had, the, ancient Indian civilization, the Egyptian civilization, Rome, Greek, which were powerful empires. And now everything, is changing. I remember India 25 years ago, they didn't have enough foreign currency, and now they're, the third largest economy. So I think, everything is changing. I remember a cartoon I saw, what will everyone look like in the future? It was a Simpsons cartoon.
Oh, the Simpsons.
Yeah, and everyone was, together. I think, as people have more understanding and you see more intermixing of people because of communications, and you see more intermarriages, I think you'll see the world coming together. You'll see, whether it's someone Irish marrying someone French or someone German marrying someone Black. You'll see all of these cultures intervening. And when you do that, you also see religions intervening and coming together. So hopefully you'll have a society that's more, you know, tolerant, or they all kind of, it's more like you said, that everyone believes in a greater good, that, because I think because of what you're saying, the internet is you're seeing societies merging together. But I remember when I was at business school at Stanford, someone said America is a melting pot. And I think it was a Chinese American student raised her hand. She goes, I'd like to think of America not as a melting pot, but like a fruit salad. And he goes, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you got African cultures, Chinese cultures, Indian cultures, Italian cultures all mixed together, but they still retain some of their roots. So even when you see kids from, intermarriages, they still have profound stuff with their culture, but you see the cultures mixing. I think you'll see a lot of that, going forward, because the world, it's more easier to communicate and fly, and meet people. So exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I know that in Canada, the whole idea is not so much of the melting pot, but the mosaic of like all the different cultures that are kind of bringing the best of what they are, holding, and essentially you're going to hold on to what you like, right? And that would be the best of whatever you're holding on to. But no, certainly. And I think that specifically with the advent of our societies now becoming closer, maybe we are headed towards a more unified existence. You were mentioning, I know that one of the items that you mentioned, like, understanding kind of spirituality, understanding where your origins are from. I think sometimes maybe because of the internet, maybe there is religion, but I think that people are into spirituality in the sense that, they believe in a certain kind of mysticism in some ways that is above whatever the practical is the manifestation of, believing in the good. And you're getting the woo-woo portion of it where, like there's a lot of that kind of, but essentially kind of maybe whatever it is that is helping them be a better version of themselves. Do you think that there's any kind of like basis to something like that or no?
So it's interesting, Colombia, they have a master's program in psychology, and one of their most popular things, it's focused on spirituality and what different people's beliefs are. Like every religion has a certain set of beliefs, and a lot of it is, based on spirituality, which is, in many cases. And, just going back, when you were talking about will the world be one? I mean, you're a good case example. You have, intermingled or intermarriage. If someone looked at you, they couldn't tell if you're Indian, Hispanic, Latina, or Greek. I think when people see the world, people don't know what different cultures they are. And I think it's fascinating. I think when I was growing up 20 years ago, now everyone kind of just accepts the fact that it's, there's different cultures and you're different. But yeah, I think spirituality and all of those things it's fascinating. If you think of Earth, the Earth is probably 6 billion years old, right? And imagine the Earth as you or me, it's us. Humanity, if you look at it, how it existed on Earth, is probably just, or not humanity, just, the ice age of life is just your nail. And just the last tip of it is humanity. So you've seen how fast we were able to evolve from, living cells to humans, and how fast evolution has taken place. NASA has a program. They have it's called the Stellar Spacecraft. There are over 100 planets that they have found that are Earth-like, that are well over 6 billion years old. And if you look at how fast evolution is evolving, I mean, literally from where there were cells to woolly mammoths to, Homo sapiens, we've all evolved incredibly. I can't even imagine how fast evolution is going to take place.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you believe in aliens?
So, I think what was that movie? If you look at, there's a good thing called Ancient Aliens, whether it's, Stonehenge in England or Easter Island or even the pyramids. If you look at it scientifically, if there are over 100 or 1,000 planets that are Earth-like that are even older, 10 billion years, life would have to evolve. Are there possibilities? If you look at extinction events in especially Earth's history, we've had 6 different extinction events, right? From the Ice Age or something. It's like when a meteorite hit the Earth and climate change, whether it wiped out the dinosaurs. You've all seen, what is that cartoon about Ice Age, how things happen. But all of that could have carried, DNA from different things we've evolved so quickly. So I think there's definitely life forms that are out there that could be much more advanced than ours or less advanced than ours. We haven't even started to explore our universe or things along those lines.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, it's relative, right? We believe that we are here and this is our society and we're the center of it. But if you think about all of the different kind of species when it comes to even humans, right? Homo erectus, before that, I didn't even know Neanderthals, and the amount of time I forget, but whether it be one of those, Homo erectus or Neanderthals, I'm not sure, but they lived for way longer. Like us as Homo sapiens has only lived like this much as in comparison to a society that has lived way longer. So, these are certain things that we just don't understand, which kind of I want to bring back to the main topic, reinvention. We have seen so much. And in some ways, the whole, and even getting back to the intro, we believe that certain things are supposed to be, and there are certain individuals within our society that also believe that this is the way it is, the hardliners, that this is the way it's supposed to go. Yet, for someone in innovation and an understanding that, like, listen, there are a lot of new things that are happening and there's a lot of potentialities that are out there. There's so much we don't know. Whether it be the evolution of whatever spirituality we have or sciences and our trajectory as human beings in our existence. What is your kind of, I would say, mindset towards what that looks like?
I think, at least I would say, there's 99% of stuff we don't know. Every day we discover something new. Whether it's, in humanity, like I said, there are people who are, working on telomeres and things, what causes aging and things like that. Just like you take a look at what COVID did, they found out people who were, had some kind of immunity to COVID, created an mRNA vaccine for that. And within 12 or 18 months, you had a vaccine for COVID. Now, just the same thing as with aging, there are certain people that don't age or their skins are, all you need to do is replicate that. There's gene sequencing with AI. Drug discovery is going to go so quickly. But now, in terms of spirituality, you just sit here and think, to your point, we're barely the existence of Earth. It's just a thing when you clip your nails, is how fast we've evolved, whether spirituality, God, ancient, there's something else, a bigger force that's driving us, and it's going to change. People talk about humanity and robots, being, integrated. There's a lot of things that are going to happen, like a lot of things, you can take over the functioning of a basic thing like your heart or something, whether it's, growing a heart. To your point, in vitro, if you can grow a whole human being in vitro, why can't you grow an organ or something like that, or transfer your consciousness or something like that? Things are going to evolve so quickly that you can't, I mean, think about it. When I was growing up, I can't even remember, I don't think we even had cell phones, or there was no such thing
With
as the
Nokia,
internet or
the
email.
brick phone.
Yeah, the brick phone, right? And technology is going to change so fast and so quickly, we have no idea where humanity is going to be. So, I think the thing that, we're going to live forever, you know, that could be very true. People don't think that is. I mean, you see people doing exciting things when they're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, or 70s.
And maybe even not in a physical capacity, maybe like you mentioned, consciousness.
Yeah.
What if we're just being conscious somewhere else? Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? But I love this, and I think that that's all of these, and just to kind of create this idea of culmination as to the items that we've talked about, whether it be physical reality and there's the spirituality, but you also understanding just the realm of the sciences, being a physician, but then also putting on that kind of through the lens of being an innovator, but then also understanding the political landscape as someone who is, involved in kind of like these political community. There are so many different ways that an individual can reinvent themselves, and I think that our society is also reinventing itself over and over again, as we've seen historically. I think that perhaps maybe one of my last questions I want to ask is that if you were to give somebody who wanted to reinvent themselves, such as, I mean, perhaps maybe they look at you and they're like, oh my gosh, she's so accomplished, maybe I'm a stay-at-home mom and I don't know where to start, or somebody that is stuck in a career that is like, listen, I don't see any other way. I'm in a hands-to-mouth situation. Where would you kind of advise them as to, because I'm saying is that what you've been through, I'm sure, and mentioning 10,000 hours, those are not lovely, just completely romantic looking 10,000 hours. Those are grueling, what advice would you give somebody who wanted to kind of start over, and maybe just needs a little bit of a kind of like a nudge, like, hey, look, you can do it. Like, if they're going to hear anything, and if you could say something to them, like specifically, like what would you say to them?
So, like one thing I said, I think eventually humanity may never age, we may live forever, but today we've never gotten past that. So, if you look in a mirror, you're not happy with your relationship or not happy with your work environment, you need to change, because as of now, we're not going to live forever. So I think you need to people maybe follow your passions and try to get rid of some of the fears that you have. I think it's always scary doing something different or reinventing yourself. But to your point, that scariness or doing something different brings almost an adrenaline or emotion. It can almost make you happy, because if what you're doing, and let's say to your point, if you're a stay-at-home mom, it's great. There's a lot of fulfillment bringing your family and up and kids, but there's no reason you can't write a book. You can't start a technology company. You can't, if you want to be a painter or a painter, or if you want to act, you've got to try so many different things. You don't need to have like an innate skill set. There's so many people who never went to college, who created great companies or become artists or done so many different things. So whatever your passion is, I think follow it. And what was that saying? If you don't have the courage to, lose sight of the shore, you'll never discover, new oceans.
Yeah.
I think, try something, be passionate about it, and don't give up. Just keep on going. And to your point, it may change so many different times, but you'll find something doing what you love doing. And eventually you'll get there and you'll see the light. So that's what, I tell everyone. Don't be scared. Don't worry, to your point, about what everyone else says. Do what you love doing and you're going to end up being happy.
Yeah, and which is like uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable, but you brought up a really good point, is that, and at least with my experience of discomfort and trying new things, is that, yeah, there is that one little bit that when you decide, oh, I'm going to do that, a little bit of happiness. There's something a little bit
There's excitement,
exciting.
yeah, it's fun.
There's something exciting, even though you might think this is the worst and this is the most uncomfortable thing that I've ever done. So I love that advice. So, so this is amazing. My last question to you, and I think just to kind of create this kind of just full circle, still, I feel like I still think I need to elaborate a little bit more. All of these different things that you've tried. Why?
I mean, I think some of the stuff someone says it's like, but I think the harder you work, like there was an internet company that we started that we put ads on using the internet. Those were the days of dial-up when you used to call in America online. We started a company and we said all the best things in life are free: love, sex, and extreme. And overnight, we became the third largest internet service provider in England, and the company, went public. I think there's a certain sense of excitement of trying different things. And like, I'm a physician. We've done stuff in aerospace, in healthcare, in all sorts of stuff. So don't let your upbringing or your schooling or your culture define you. Go do something that makes you really happy. And that's what's gonna, I don't let society or your, like I said, your upbringing, your culture, do what you do that makes you happy, and don't be afraid to fail. I mean, I can tell you there are probably thousands of things that I've done that have failed. I think it's almost like taking pancakes and throwing them up on the wall and seeing which one, sticks and that you like.
Mhm.
And don't be afraid of change. If you like doing something, try it. If it doesn't work, go try something else.
So there's a lot of pancakes on your ceiling then.
A lot of pancakes
Okay.
and a lot of ones that fell off it didn't stick.
Okay. Well, amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much. It is, again, an honor to be speaking to you and hearing your perspective directly. So thank you so much, Chirinjeev, for being here. I really appreciate it and learned a lot.
No, thanks. I think what you're doing, having stuff like your podcast, really helped encourage a lot of people. I wish I had these podcasts growing up. It would have probably changed my life a lot in a better way too. So it's good for what you're doing too. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Wonderful.